Today, I'm going to show you what we're doing to cut these back, to prune them so that we can overwinter them indoors. Now, I do not claim to be an expert with peppers, except maybe an expert at eating them because I do enjoy peppers very much. But I do know what worked for us last year, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. So let's take a look at how we're overwintering our peppers. Now I'm going to use our California Wonder bell pepper here as an example of the first thing we do when we're overwintering our peppers, and that's to go through and to pull off any peppers that are left on here. Even the ones that are immature are still going to taste nice, and we're going to do that before we do any of the other pruning. Now you can see there are actually still quite a few peppers left on this plant, and so if I go around and gather them up from all of our varieties, we're probably still going to have a couple of nice handfuls anyway to bring in. And this California Wonder pepper has been by far our best plant, and it's the one that we overwintered this way last winter. Now that first part of taking off the red peppers you saw from our California Wonder, but we have quite a few different varieties out here, and we're going to basically treat them the same. This was our red pepper that's a gift pepper. I don't even really know the variety, but we got this from a place where we got seedlings in the past. And so I want to cut this one down and show you what that pruning looks like. Now typically here at Guten Yardening, we grow sweet peppers. I like spicy peppers, but my family doesn't, so it doesn't really make sense to give a lot of space to those spicier peppers. But my understanding is, for the most part, the anatomy of these plants is pretty similar. What we have down here at the bottom, as you can see under the leaves, we have our main stem. That's the trunk of our main stem. And on this pepper plant, we have two branches of that main stem running up the entire height of this plant. Now that won't always be the case with your pepper plants. A lot of times you'll have just that one main stem coming up, and then you'll get your branches off to the side. At least that's what we've seen. And so what I want to do today is to remove all of this green foliage. You know, one of the things about overwintering these peppers indoors is trying to prevent bringing in any kind of critters with them, because the last thing we want to do is have what happened last year, which would be to have some aphids coming in with these plants. So we're actually going to be removing all of this greenery anyway. You know, you can't always see everything, including what's down here in the soil. So we're not only going to be cutting back and pruning this all the way, we're also going to be taking this root system out and getting it washed off. And then we're going to put this in quarantine for a little while until we know for sure, well, as best we can know, that there aren't any kinds of insects or any kinds of problems coming in with this pepper plant. So what I'm going to do for this plant is I'm going to come down to where I see the Y here at the base of one of these main stems. And I'm going to go just a couple of inches above that Y, and I'm going to cut this right off. Now it's going to look like we are reducing this plant to next to nothing, and that is the reality. We're cutting it way back. I'm going to go right here, actually just right above this little node here, because we're going to see some growth coming out of here as well. So we've got two of our stems trimmed off, and then I'm going to come in and I'm also going to grab all of these leaves. I'm cutting everything off. Again, it's going to go right back basically to the stems. That's going to really eliminate and hopefully alleviate any potential issues with pests. Now this one I think is kind of interesting because the Y on this main stem doesn't happen until about, I would say, 13 or 14 inches up. So now we could come up here and trim it off right at this point, just like that, and do the same thing where I have all of these leaves coming off. So I've got almost everything trimmed off here. All right, and get these last two. So this could be what we're looking at for our plant, our pepper plant. Boy, it looks like next to nothing, doesn't it? But I don't actually have to leave this that tall. You see right here where I have, you can see one right here. You can see it right here as well. These leaf nodes. Let's see if we can get a good angle. You can see, there we go. You can see a new leaf basically popping out right here. It's going to develop if we allow it to, if the temperatures are warm enough. So I could leave it at this height, or to make this bushier, I can trim right down here above that node. And now what I have is a much more compact plant. And so when this starts to spread out, it's going to be bushier rather than taller. Now they're not all going to look exactly like this when trimmed down. In fact, I'll show you a couple of images here of some of the other ones that I have cut back. And it's not an exact science for sure. as to where you're going to cut it back. But just know you're removing all of the leaves, all of the greenery. Basically, we've just trimmed it back to where we just see the green stem. Now, this might be the last step for you if you're planning to overwinter in your garage or somewhere like that. But because we're going to be overwintering this indoors, the next step for us is to get the plant out of the soil and get these roots washed off. Again, simply to make sure that we don't bring any kinds of pests or other problems or diseases in with the soil. And what I found is washing them off with water, with a hose, or however you want to wash them off, will not be problematic at all. This will still have plenty of life in it once I place it back into soil. Before we take a look at the last step before quarantine, I want to show you one more thing. This is our California Wonder trimmed back. Now we can trim it back farther here at this Y for sure, but look at how much bigger this is after growing that second year. See how it's obviously going to bush out very clearly when it starts sprouting again here once things warm up a little bit. Well, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for these more mature, these bigger plants, because in the end, they're going to produce more pepper. Well, here's our last step before we plant them and keep them in quarantine. I've already washed off these roots as best I could. I mean, there's still going to be a little bit of mix here, but I've got some soapy water and I've added a little bit of oil just to help keep all these critters off here. And we're going to wash off the stem and everything here with this mix. It's not going to hurt them one bit, and that should be our last preventative measure before we plant these in brand new potting mix. I'm in our grow room area right now, and I have not brought the peppers down here since they've been washed and cleaned, but I'm down here to go ahead and create that soil mix that we're going to pot them in. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some of them in these 3-gallon grow bags. They look like this. This is a pretty good size, I think, for some of our bigger peppers there. And then we also have some 1-gallon grow bags. Now these are pretty small, but if you're not looking to have your pepper plant grow at all over the winter, if you're just trying to keep it in hibernation as best you can, then a bag this size should be just fine. Now, one of the benefits of overwintering in these grow bags, and we've actually talked about this in some of our other videos, but because there is porous material here and the air can pass in and out, we have that nice air pruning that occurs. So whatever we take out of here when we're ready to up pot in the spring or transplant just in general, this will not be root bound. So again, that's a nice added benefit of overwintering in these grow bags. But I'm going to go ahead and create a nice potting mix here in our laptop soil mixing container. If you've never used one of these are absolutely fabulous to have, especially if you're growing indoors and you don't want to make a mess with your soil. So I'm going to be using some of our Coco Cure, a bunch of our worm castings. Our worms have been really busy prepping themselves for this time, and I just harvested about 4 gallons of worm castings. So I've got worm castings and we've got some peat moss to go in here. I'm going to create a really nice mix and get these potted. Now, as I'm mixing this up, one thing I should note is none of this was opened up before we brought it in here. One of the things we're trying to avoid in all of this is bringing in any pests if we can help it. So this mix is all sterile in terms of not being outside before. And so I think that's going to help us in this process. But if you choose to use potting mix that's pre-made, again, that's not a problem whatsoever. Just make sure you use a fresh bag. All right, I have made up a really nice mix here. I think this pepper plant is going to love it. Now, I brought one of these down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plant it down here and then bring it right back up into the quarantine area. Now, I want to remind you of something. This is a method that worked for us last year. That's why we're repeating it again this year. And all I've done so far is to take about 2 inches of this mix and I've patted it down a little bit here in the base of this 3-gallon grow bag. And when I place it in this grow bag, you can see I've got plenty of room in here. I'm just going to cover up this root area, which is exactly how it was when it was in the container. Now, as I'm adding the mix into this bag and getting this pepper situated, I'm just pressing a little bit on here. And I just want it to be nice and firmly in place. I do want to point something else out. If you're just trying to keep these in a dormant state, then you're probably going to want to store them in, say 55 to 60 degree Fahrenheit temperature indoors. And then you may still see some leaf development, but you just trim those off. If, like us, you want to grow some peppers over the winter, well, we're keeping this in a warmer area inside of our grow room once it's out of quarantine. And so we'll have 70 to 75 degrees, which means we are going to start to see some green growth coming in here over the winter. So, we should see some development soon. So it's up to you how you want to handle that. Do you want to just keep it dormant, or do you want to, like us, try to grow some peppers? Now the mix that I put in here is already damp, so I'm not going to have to water it for a little while, and I'm not going to feed it anything until I start to see some of the leaves coming back on. And again, if we're trying to grow indoors, then I'm going to start feeding it. If I'm trying to keep it dormant, I'm not going to feed it again until it's almost time to bring it outside in the spring. This is ready to go back up into quarantine. Now, the more we learn about growing peppers and the more success we have, the more we're going to share with you, because anything that brings more production is going to be something we want to get out there to help you make the most out of your peppers. Now, even though I wouldn't consider us in any way experts on pepper growing, if we find a method that works for us that we think would be helpful to you, we are definitely going to share that out. So if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, don't forget to give us a like. Leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.